Hello, it's Kevin. So welcome to lesson 3 of Principles of Posture. In the first two videos, we were setting things up so you can do your own experiments, and then also try to figure out what's really going on rather than what we think is going on when it comes to our posture and our movement. This lesson, we're going to do some more analysis of what's going on and move on to changing things. So I've started with you're having to learn to see what's really happening before you can change things. We need to just stop doing we need to stop trying to fix things before we even understand what it is that's happening. So that's why the first 3 lessons are like this. Next week, we will do a lot more changing what it is we see. A little bit of that at the end of this week too. The goals for this one are learn how to analyze your own posture by seeing the examples I'm going to use. I'm going to give you some examples, and then you're going to use those examples to analyze your own posture in the same way. And then I want to show you the main three different types of bad posture. This will help you analyze your own and other people as well. So that's what I mean by you might want to become a bit of a posture pervert. So you don't need to do anything weird, but you can start watching other people and analyzing them, and this will help you with your own posture a huge amount. Plus, it's fun. The way to use this video is to learn the principle I'm about to give you, to look at the examples, think about them, try and understand it, and then do your own movement experiments, and then come back to the principle after. So just to review, all of the principles are true in all of the lessons, but I have to teach you them sequentially or you won't remember them. And also I want every principle to be immediately put into action and for you to do something that will make it real for you. So that's the purpose of the movement experiments. The movement experiments build on each other, so they'll get more and more complex. So don't worry if it doesn't make sense now. The details will be filled in later. You'll learn more later. Just have a go. It doesn't matter what the results are at this stage. You've been doing your current posture for years, decades maybe. So another few weeks doesn't matter. If you need extra help, email me or message me on Twitter. And if you want personalized instructions about what you're doing or me to help analyze your video in detail with you, book a one-to-one lesson. If you've already booked a one-to-one lesson, email me and we will set up a time. Okay, principle of posture number 3, static versus dynamic. So people generally assume posture is a static thing, a fixed thing, and that they're stuck in one position and they want to make themselves into a different position. This is ingrained not only in the way that we just think and assume about it, but also in when we go to fix it. I just said it, when we try to fix our posture. So it isn't the assumption is you will find the right position and then fix yourself into it and then try and keep it for as long as you can, as if it's a fixed thing. Well, it isn't a fixed position. It's made of movements, not just one movement, but many separate movements all interacting with each other, mostly happening at the same time. And when I say movements of parts, so you'll see the different parts of the body, the torso, the arms, the legs, the head, they're all moving in certain ways relative to one another. And together they create a posture. So I'll explain this in a minute. But the main thing to understand is that for most people, this is just mostly subconscious. The movements that happen, let's just say there's like 12 movements all going on at once. Nobody has any idea really which movements they're doing. They don't know which movements which body part is starting the movements. They don't know. It's just completely out of our awareness. We just take it for granted until you get a problem later. So one of the things we're going to have to do here is to learn to see the movements that create your posture. The lesson here is if your posture is made of movements, so the movements come first, posture second. Posture is like the end result, the consequence of a series of movements you're doing. So if you can't change your posture directly by trying to make a different posture without changing the movements. So you need to make new movements. So if you change your movements, you will change the shape that the movements make, which means a different posture. So if you think of a Rubik's Cube, you can't do one color, then another color, then another color, side by side by side. You have to kind of work in multiple movements at the same time in order to solve the Rubik's Cube. You can focus on one color for a little while, but you can't actually just finish the blue, then finish the red. It doesn't work like that. So there's multiple movements all happening together, and then they create the shape, or like on a Rubik's Cube is the color pattern you'll see. So what people do is when they try and change the posture directly, or they do something with the shoulder, or they do something with the back, or whatever it is, it's like they're trying to pick off the color stickers on the Rubik's Cube and put them in place, rather than doing the movements you need to do to put them in the place. And these are simultaneous movements that need to happen together. So as I say, this is just completely out of awareness for most people. Vague idea, vague feeling of what's happening. So in this lesson, we're going to make the unconscious conscious when it comes to your movements. As I say, if you change your movements, you change your posture. Posture, it's better to think of posture as a symptom rather than the cause. It's not like you have your posture and then you go around moving with the posture. It's that you do some movements and then that creates the posture. So this is an image of me doing an experiment a while ago. And I just want to show you that this is the kind of idea where we're taking snapshot images of movements, and then we can analyze each like second or split second of the movements and see what different parts are doing. So this is more complex than you need for now, but I'm just wanting to show you this. You can ignore my terrible dress sense in this video, or any videos for that matter. There's just really just to demonstrate so you can see the different parts moving in different ways. And I'm doing specific things with my arms here to try and change the shape of my back as I stand up, and then I'm analyzing the results of the movements through time. What we're doing here in these videos, or in the way to analyze your posture I'm teaching you, is, well, let me take a step back. In the last video, I was talking about don't go by feeling, go by seeing. Use the video. Don't just judge by your feelings. So if you've started using the video, have you been doing your own experiments? Have you been doing your own experiments, or do I need to come over there? Is that the tough love way the gym bros do it? Something like this. Maybe more swearing I need. But anyway, so you need to see what it is. You need to learn to see, or it's useless. So you probably just looked and went, what am I looking at? I don't know what I'm looking at. What we're going to be looking for is movements. So this is why taking screenshots is important, because you can, or slow motion, you can slow it down and you can isolate different parts and then see how they move. So it's good to think of posture as an analogy between posture and movement is between screenshots and the video. So there's a video and you can take screenshots of the video. They're just a snapshot in time. On its own, you can't really tell much other than in the context of the actions surrounding this movement. You'll see this set of movements here makes sense. You can see I'm going from sitting to standing, and you'll see I've maintained a lengthened back throughout most of it, which is what I was aiming for. This wasn't just happening by itself to me. We'll talk about more about that in the next lessons. If you want to change your posture, if you want a different screenshot, you need a different video. You can't just change the screenshot. So again, I need to keep reminding you posture is an effect of other things that are happening, movements, and those movements are happening out of awareness at the moment. You need to bring them into awareness, by first understanding, analyzing the different movements. It's the goal in this video. And then you can start changing them, moving them around, and then you look on video to see how the different movements have affected the whole. Posture springs I've been talking about, these biomechanical springs that everybody has. That was in the sign-up page to this course. You can only activate them by doing specific movements of different parts. There's a certain way of doing this. We'll talk about that in the next couple of lessons. But you can't do this by trying to directly change your posture. You have to do the movements that activate the springs. So if you want to activate the springs, you have to learn the movements. There's no other way around it. And there's specific combinations of them that you have to train yourself to do over time. So the other thing about analyzing movements like this is you begin to detach yourself from the feelings. So when I'm looking at this image of me here, I'm not thinking at all about the feelings I had when I did this. Actually, I felt bizarre and horrendous in parts of it, and it just felt like it was wrong and the right thing. I wasn't doing the right thing, or I forgot something and all this. And then when I saw the video, I forgot about all that, and then I started analyzing what I actually saw, what happened in reality. So this is going back to the last lesson. So this is a good way for detachment, because when you first look at yourself, you'll cringe, and I'll show you an image. I'll show you a couple of images of me later that I still cringe a little bit, but you'll probably be cringing at the start and not liking what you're looking at. So anyway, you'll get over that a little bit, but it doesn't matter. You have your cringe feeling, and then you just get on with the work anyway. Doesn't bother you. The final thing is when you break it into movements, and there's a good reason to do this, is what normally we think of as fixed health conditions just become a set of movement. They're just the wrong movements. You need to change the movements. So I'm not saying this is true of all health conditions. Obviously, some things are, genetic or whatever. But there are many conditions that people think are fixed. For example, some people with scoliosis, I'm not saying all of them, but some people with scoliosis where they're kind of twisted. A lot of those is just movements, a bad set of movement habits, and a certain pattern that's just been repeated in an extreme form over a long period of time. And if you change the movements, you remove the condition. Whereas the person tends to think, and often professionals dealing with it tend to think it's some kind of fixed thing about the way they are, as their like core identity is this scoliosis. It's a condition they can't fix, or you need surgery. Often you just need different movements. So we'll talk about the scoliosis soon. There's a phrase I came up with: movements that fire together, wire together. So it's based on the neuroscience idea that neurons that fire together wire together. And the idea here is the more times the same neurons fire together, the more likely they are to fire together in future, and then that starts building a network of connections that then makes those type of actions associated with those more and more likely, and other types of actions less and less likely, and it becomes wired in and more fixed. And this is why habits and personality, parts of personality and these things become kind of almost hardwired into people and difficult to change over time. So the analogy is the same idea with movements. If you do the same set of movements, as I said, posture is made of many movements interacting. If you do the same movements over and over again, you'll just start doing that pattern as a whole, and you won't even realize that there's all little separate movements that make up the pattern. This is the situation for most people. So as I said earlier, posture is the end result of a series of movements. But movements of what? Movements of parts. This is the way to think about it. It's moving parts, not one big movement, and not feelings of movements. So it's visible, physical movements of parts that you can see. So I put this image here of this artist's, I don't know where these dummy toy for helping them draw. And you'll see these are separated into parts, and the person here has made it into like a sort of sore back kind of movement by moving the parts around. It's created this posture. So it's the same for us, but way more complicated, obviously, because we're alive, and the parts are moving together. They're not separated like this. But this is a way to think about it. You just change the parts around to change the posture of this figure if you wanted to. Same with yourself. It's a complex system. So if you move one part in one place, other parts will move. This is why just pulling your shoulders back won't work, because you need to do there's many problems with that actually, but one of the reasons is you can't just fix one body part or attempt to fix one body part. Pulling your shoulders back is misguided, by the way. We'll get to that later. But you can't just do one on its own. It's a complex system. You change something over here, something else will change over here, like an overcompensation, or some other new habit will pop up somewhere else, like that game Whack-A-Mole. So when the kids you hit one and another thing pops up and you have to keep hitting them. That's just all that will happen. So you need to somehow change all of the movements together. This is one of the things I'm teaching in the course. So if we're going to look at movements of parts, and I'm telling you not to go by feeling, it needs to be something you see on camera. You can't really see muscles on camera. Well, you can see them, but you can't see what's happening. Muscles are way too complex to use for this, because they're changing shape, they're moving. You can't see a lot of them in the interaction with them. There's hundreds of them. It's way too complicated. So what we'll use instead is we're going to look at bony parts rather than muscles. So I'm going to define some specific parts on the structure, bony parts that you can see on video, especially when you're standing side on. And then we can start looking where are those parts in space? Do they go forward? Do they go back? Do they go up? Do they go down? And how are they moving relative to other bony parts? I'll show you this in the next slide. But the general process we'll use is going from the whole to the parts and back to the whole. So some of you are probably already thinking this isn't very holistic, or mind, body, spirit, and this kind of integrated kind of thing. We're just breaking into parts, quite materialist, reductionist, or whatever. No, we do have to break it into parts and understand the mechanisms, but we start with the whole, break it into parts to understand it better, and then go back to the whole. But now when we look at the whole, or when we try to change the whole posture as a whole, we see different things now and we understand it more. So the whole to parts to a new, enriched, larger whole, better understanding, both in terms of analysis on video like now, but then also when you actually go to train yourself to change your posture. And that what that means in practice is we're going from watching videos to taking screenshots, analyzing screenshots, and then going back to the video. And you'll see new things. And then when you see new things, you can do new things. The main things, so the most important body part of posture is the torso as a whole. So what's the torso? The torso is no neck and head, no arms, shoulders, no legs. So you're left with the structure from the bottom of the pelvis, the sitting bones at the bottom, all the way up to the top of the spine where it meets the top of the ribs. So but no neck. So this is your torso. Torso is a mechanism. There's different parts of it, and it can move in different ways. For most people, it's just kind of wired together, and they don't really think about this. By the way, this is an ancient Greek statue of a charioteer, which I'll be talking about more in another lesson. But it's very interesting from a posture point of view. And here's some of the spots, some bony spots that we're going to use for doing your experiments, both on the statue and on a diagram here of the torso. So torso, there's not just the bones, but there's also the cavity. So there's like the large abdominal cavity, pelvic cavity, thoracic cavity. So these are obviously full of internal organs. Which, if depending on how your posture is, they're going to be getting moved around or placed in different positions or even crushed based on your posture. So there's a way that they prefer to be. This is just, mechanical, basic. This many kind of health conditions might be just being affected by crushing the internal organs consistently day after day after day. Not a doctor, not a medical guy, but I know this is true because I've seen people come out of it by changing the posture. So anyway, so which spots do we need? Are you going to use in this lesson? So you remember the sternum? You had your hand on the sternum last week. Fingers at the top, palm at the bottom. So this is the sternum bone here. So first spot, top of the sternum. So you can feel that up here. It's the highest part of the bone, up beside your throat. And then the bottom of the sternum, as you go down to the lowest part of the sternum bone, not the cartilage that's further down here, but the lowest part of the hard bone between your ribs here, that's bottom of the sternum. So when you put your hands on it and you were sitting side onto the camera, you would be able to see which was further forward, the top of the sternum and the bottom of the sternum. For most people, it's going to be the bottom of the sternum was much further forward and the top of the sternum was pulled back. Not always, but for most people. So those are two spots to see, bony spots. We can see where they are on the camera. The next place is the rib 8 spot, which create a line between the two spots here. You see on the in the middle of the diagrams. So the rib 8, if you follow your ribs down the front, they're flat down the front, and then suddenly there's a corner where they curve round to the side. If you suck in your belly, you'll be able to see the bone. There's quite a pronounced where it suddenly turns a corner and goes round to the side, your ribs. If you look side on, it goes flat and then it comes round to the side. So if you can find that with your fingers easily. This is rib 8, right in that corner. So this is a very obvious one you'll see on video if you, in one of the images I'll show you in a minute. So we need those, the rib 8s. We need these points here. I'm just calling these the pelvis points to keep it simple. So if you feel around the front of your pelvis bone, there's a little knobbly bit of bone here at the front. You'll see it points out. You go one on each side, kind of maybe under your belt line. They have a more complicated name. It's the anterior superior iliac spine, but we'll just call it pelvis points so you know what we're talking about. Keep it simple for your brain to play with. And here at the very bottom, we have, of the one on the right, the very bottom, we have the sitting bones. So these, if you're sitting on a hard chair, like I suggested to you in the first video, these are the bones you'll feel pushing into the chair underneath. Or if you sit on the floor, you can feel these pushing into the floor. So that's the bottom of the torso. So this is the bottom of the torso, the pelvis area, and the middle of the torso is these ribs in the middle, and the top of the torso we'll call this top of the sternum. So you can imagine this torso area in three segments: upper, middle, lower. So if it's in three segments, you can imagine the three segments moving in different ways. So you could coordinate them in a different way. So let's talk about the three types of bad posture. Type number one, the sloucher. So everyone knows this guy. You've seen him. You have maybe be him. You know this is wrong. Everybody knows this is wrong. They're reminded of it. Maybe somebody comes up, clips you in the ear, or reminds you of it, or whatever. You just catch yourself. So there's no debate about this. So I'm going to draw some pictures on this to show you what the movements are here. So if you look at the sloucher, Mr. Sloucher, let's call him. And let's look at his torso. What's the different parts of his torso doing? So imagine the top of his torso. This is the top of his sternum here. So the top of the sternum is moving forward. So the bottom of his top of the sternum, that's the top of the upper torso. The bottom of his sitting bones here are actually sliding round forward as well. And the ribs in the middle are going back, or moving back. So this, we see a curve, but what is actually happening is there's three big movements: upper torso forward, lower torso, the sitting bones rolling forward, the bottom curving round forward, and the ribs in the middle going back, and that creates a curve. It's like you're bending a stick or something. Same with the mis-sloucher. So you'll see the upper torso is going forward, middle going back, and then the sitting bones going forward here. So these are just happening to people. They don't notice. This guy didn't start sitting like this. The movements began, they're more or less unconscious, subconscious, or you want to say it, habitual. And they just keep happening because he's got no control over them, and they just get more and more and more, and then he just creates this slouch. Same with and people solve this by collapsing on the back of the chair. So you may be doing this right now. And then this woman who doesn't have the back of the chair, she's kind of just collapsing forward like this in order to kind of maintain herself. But what is the collapse? The collapse is doing these big movements, forward, and back all at the same time. Okay, so that's the sloucher. So the next type, well, this is type 2. We'll call him the Sergeant Major. This is the male version. I'll show you the female version in a minute. He's doing similar things to the last guy, but it's in reverse. So he's doing three big movements also. Again, mostly out of awareness, but not quite for this guy, because he actually thinks he's standing up straight with his shoulders back. He has a kind of idea in his mind. He probably can't see himself. Well, he can't see himself, and he may have not saw the photograph either for a long time or may not have seen it at all. So to him, he's just going by his feeling, stand up straight with the shoulders back. You can see he's creating this massive curve. What's he doing? He's pulling the upper torso back, the lower torso back, and the middle torso forward. So it's three big movements, but it's the reverse of the sloucher. Remember, the sloucher was pulling the middle back and the upper and the bottom forward. So this guy's doing the same three big movements, but in reverse. Creates a curve in the opposite direction. So here's more details. So here's the top of the sternum. Here's the rib eights on the right. On the picture on the right, there's top of the sternum. You see it's getting moved back. The arrow showed it move back. The rib eights, you see it's moving forward. And you'll see the pelvis point is going forward and down because your pelvis is it's rotating. So it's rolling forward and down. And you'll see the sitting bones at the bottom are actually rotating back and up because this is part of the same pelvis rotational movement. And you'll see this creates this big curve inward in the lower back, exactly like the Sergeant Major has here. So there's, again, these spots are these bony spots can be seen to be moving in certain directions, forward or back, all at the same time. It's the difference between this and the sloucher. The sloucher is mostly almost all subconscious. This guy has a kind of conscious idea of go by the feeling of standing up straight, of feeling straight, of pull the shoulders back like people are told. These are kind of like conceptual ideas that people are kind of fuzzily keep in their mind, and then they do them, and then most people don't look and see what the results are. So you can see this looks ridiculous. Most people aren't this extreme, but many people are doing this in a little amount. So just so you know, I'm not sexist. Here's the female version. So pouter pigeon. So you can see clearly I'm not sexist. So pouter pigeon, this is an old term they had for these women in corsets. This style in the early 20th century. This is the pouter pigeon up on the top left. Pretty funny when you look at them. But this is the style that they designed corsets for women to make them into this shape. So, the ass sticking out at the back, the chest sticking out at the front. And because it's not, you don't want to be in that shape, the corset would pull on tight and pull them into that shape for, attractiveness or whatever. It's basically the female version of the Sergeant Major. Try to look attractive and powerful or sexy. But actually it's kind of silly when you see the details and when you actually start looking at the movements involved. So you see this girl in the middle. She's like the Sergeant Major, but you're viewing from behind. Look at this angle down her back here. You can see this massive angle. And I'll draw some more pictures on this one too. This angle here. The angle there. And then the angle here. So that tells you that her lower back is curved very far in to create this angle. She's pushing her hips forward her pelvis points are going rotating very far forward and down, pulling her lower back in, and she's pulling her shoulders back a lot. This is very uncomfortable. This makes people's backs sore, especially if you're wearing shoes. This is just what people are taught to do. So this is and then obviously these are static images. This is a girl walking. This is a girl exercising. We can see the same movements are beginning to happen here. So that we've just been talking about, as she's doing the squats, she is pulling the upper torso back, the sitting bones back, and the ribs in the middle are going forward. The rib eights are going forward. So as she's probably not this extreme a curve when she's standing, but as she does the squat, she does more of what she's used to. So she's used to coordinating those three movements together, or miscoordinating those three big movements together. So when she does them, when she's doing something with stress, with weight, people just tend to do more of what they already know. So this is the third type of bad posture. Call this the Cork Screw. So this is a scoliosis, which is, I said earlier, people tend to think it was a fixed medical condition, that's just the way they are. But if you start to look at it in the context, if you start to analyze it in the context of movements, you'll see that maybe it isn't. So what the person is doing, there's scoliosis, it's a screwing downward movement. So here's the corkscrew to make you think of this. But look, she's pulling look at the left shoulders going back and down. The right shoulders is going forward and up. If you look at the picture on the right, look at the difference between the hips on the left and the left side of the pelvis on the right side of the pelvis. Look at the difference. Look at this curve in there. So she's screwing herself down into the ground. Look at the shoulder blades, how they're coming so close together. This is like narrowing your upper back. If you're doing this, you can't pull the shoulder blades back together like this without also curving in your lower back like this. You'll see she's got the curved in back. So she also has the pouter pigeon happening as well as the scoliosis. So she's screwing down and doing the pouter pigeon at the same time. People like this tend to just get surgery and they just throw in a metal rod in their spine or whatever, or there was other techniques where they like hang them and things and stuff. So like there was like people with scoliosis, they made them hang on a sort of strap bag thing around them for many hours a day, and it straightened them up. But what happened was, just as soon as they stopped hanging on the thing, the scoliosis just came back. Why? Because they're habits of those movements being right are still in them. They haven't changed the movements. So the old posture will just re-establish itself because it's been imposed on them from outside, not created from the inside. This goes back to lesson 1. Scoliosis. So you but also do combinations of the different types of bad posture. Very common, I see. And this, what's interesting about this is it shows that it proves posture is not a fixed position, because I'll see someone go from the slouching sitting position and 2 seconds later they're in the standing up sergeant major position in 2 seconds. And as I said earlier, these are opposite movements. So you've gone from pulling the upper torso and the lower torso forward and the middle back, so that you'll see it creates this curve in the back. You'll see in the middle here. And then at some point during the standing up, they start pulling the upper torso back and the lower torso back and the middle torso forward to create the curve in the opposite direction. So if you can do this in 2 seconds, it's not a fixed position. You're doing movements to change them. And if you can do it in 2 seconds unconsciously, well, you can do it 2 seconds consciously as well if you learn to change the movements. So I see this is very common. I see this all the time, actually, is people that do both. And often I'll ask people, who are you more like, the sloucher or sergeant major? And they usually say sloucher. And then they're actually often more similar to the sergeant major than the sloucher. They're not as bad as the sloucher, but they're no one's as bad as the sergeant major, but getting close to it. If you stand up straight with your shoulders back in the video you made in the first lesson, if you look at that video, you may have done the sergeant major. You may have seen yourself doing the sergeant major. It's ludicrous, but it feels like you're doing the right thing. Again, that was lesson 2. That's the problem. I want you to analyze yourself according to these 3 types of bad posture. So there's an image of me as well. So I was doing a set of movements here. You'll see the image on the left is sergeant major. This is how I started the movement. I know this is the curve from working with myself. It's easier if you have your top off or whatever, if you're working on your own. But you learn to be able to see underneath clothes what movements people are making, what shape their back is and stuff. So you have X-ray goggles. So I know that this is the shape here based on where the other parts are. That was my starting position. I was doing a set of movements to do with lengthening and widening the back, and you'll see that this curve now is much closer to a straight line at the back. And I made myself I've made my torso a little bit longer, which is what I was aiming for in these experiments. We'll talk about that in lesson 4, I think. And I've just drawn this on with a graphics app. So you can use Zoom like I was doing earlier, because I'm recording this on Zoom. So Zoom have an annotation tool you can use. You can use on Preview on Mac, and there's like free graphics apps you can use. If you've got Photoshop or something like that, you can use those, obviously, but you don't need them. Take the videos that you already have or make new videos of yourself just now, standing and sitting, walking to and from the camera, and then take screenshots of key moments. So when you finished sitting, so people have a feeling of when they finished sitting, and they have a feeling of when they finished standing. So you watch someone stand up and you'll see them kind of finish and get ready to be standing now at the end. You'll see yourself doing this on tape, on video, same tape, showing my age now. Draw a diagram on the image. So to make it clear, like I've done here to show the curves, but also draw the arrows of the movements you see. So you'll see on this one, on the one on the left, it's clear that my middle torso, the ribs in the middle were moving forward, creating this curve. Whereas on this one, the ribs in the middle were moving back, which is flattening the curve. Flatten the curve. Okay, so this is a more truthful, honest, useful version of flatten the curve. I might have to cut that out. Anyway, the point is to start making diagrams of what you see to make it clear. This green line, by the way, is a green line from the front of my instep, where my foot meets your shin at the bottom, just to see what parts of what weight is behind the line and what weight is in front of the line. You'll see more of the body is behind the line than the one on the right. That's more advanced for later. This is what I want you to do for yourself. When you draw the arrows on, like I did earlier, I'll just do it again to make it clear. Draw the movements you see. Okay, so the one on the left, I've seen myself. What's happening? I'm seeing the ribs in the middle come forward. I'm seeing the pelvis point. I'm seeing it go forward and kind of go forward and rolling forward and down here. And I'm seeing the top of the sternum move back. And all these movements happening together. This is my habitual movements that I had all my life that I've been working against doing this work. You'll have your own ones. So I coordinate another different set of movements. We'll more in future lessons, we'll go into what the movements are more, but you'll see that I've been the ribs in the middle at the front. I've been pulling back. The upper torso, I haven't been pulling back. I was more or less maintaining it in place, but to do that, I had to kind of think of it going forward. And the pelvis points are starting to rotate back and up now, because you know this pelvis making rotation. So this is basically just what to do yourself. So this seems like, oh, why am I just like drawing pictures? It seems like kind of silly. This is training your brain to clarify the different movements, to see how they interact with each other, cause and effect. Because you can't, if you change one of these movements, you'll see it has effect on the others. This trains your brain to see the movements separately, and then when you go to make new movements to change which will change your posture, your brain is now able to do that because it's clear. It's not just fuzzy feelings. It's conceptions, it's ideas, it's rules in your mind of where you want things to be. It's essential. It's the only way. And the goal here is just to see the movements you're making, because as I said earlier, posture's made of movements. You need to see the movements, and then you make new ones. Create a new posture. So now you've done made your pictures, you've taken screenshots. I want you to start analyzing, and you've drawn some diagrams. I want you to start analyzing what you see. So there's no point watching this video unless you've got your own images in front of you. Well, that's not true. You'll still learn, but you're not going to change anything unless you start doing it with your own ones. So here's the Sergeant Major again. You'll see I'm just showing the movements he's doing. Upper torso, the top of the sternum is moving back. The ribs in the middle are going forward. The sitting bones are going back. The pelvis. It's not drawn on here, but the pelvis points are going forward and down. And then you'll see like the upper thigh is actually moving forward, because you'll see his leg is leaning forward like this. You'll maybe notice you're doing something similar when you stand also. So look how much weight is further forward of this block line here. This guy's collapsing forward, but he's having to use muscles to hold himself up in position. It's tightening because he's falling forward. So the weight of the middle torso going forward, you have no choice but to pull the upper torso back in order not to fall over. It's the only way if you're going to do that. So you don't need to have this shape of torso. So you'll see it's like a NFL football tilted backwards at the top. So I want you a few things to look at in your images. Look at the angle of the sternum bone. So you'll know when you had your hand on it earlier, which is top forward, or the bottom, or your palm at the bottom, which is further forward. So you'll see there's a very sharp angle here this guy has. You might be surprised, or in the last lesson, you might have been surprised at the angle of your sternum bone, even though they felt like they were in the same line, or you maybe even felt that the top was further forward. I've had several people who have had this kind of angle of the sternum bone, and I've asked them before they saw any images. I said, which is further forward, the top of the sternum or the bottom? And they've said the top. And then I've showed the picture and they've been shocked, rightly, because how can it be so wrong? How can your feeling be so wrong? So that's lesson 2. You might want to go back to lesson 2 and review it, of why I spent so much time talking about why you can't trust your feeling. Next thing to do is look at curves. Is there a curve in the lower back? Is there a curve round the front? So you can draw this on in diagrams like I did in the last one. Or you can just draw arrows of the movements to create the curve. So imagine you have a bar, or like a wooden stick, and you want to bend it. You push the top and the bottom closer together, and the middle pushes out. That's what this guy's doing with his movements. It's just happening by itself. So are you doing that? When you're slouching, when you're sitting, are you slouching and doing this in reverse? When did you decide to do these movements? Probably never. They just happen to you, I'm guessing. So now to start thinking about changing it. So how would you change them? So let's just say you were like this guy and it's very extreme like this. How would you straighten this curve up at the back? Well, you would just do the opposite, like I demonstrated with me in the last one. You move the ribs in the middle back. You move the upper forward instead of back, and you move you rotate the same ones forward and down instead of back. So you're doing the opposite. So it's like, again, if you've bent, say you bent a bar, Superman's bent the bar, say it's like upright, you bend the bar. If you want to straighten it, you need 3 movements, not just one. Sorry, not just 2. You can't just pull the top 2 back. You need to kind of have your finger in the middle. Let's say as a bar. Let's say you're not Superman and it's like a stick and you're trying to straighten it. You need some kind of pressure in the middle and you straighten it. So there's 3 places to straighten it. Unless you have like a giant friend who will come and straighten your torso like this, you're going to have to do it with your mind, which is something we're going to be learning in future lessons. Which movements do you need to change it? Do they need to go forward or back? It might be different when you're slouching than it is when you're standing. So we need to have a look at that. This is a cringe old picture of me. I didn't want to show this because it still makes me cringe, but this is right at the beginning when I started years ago. And I want to show you how much of it you can just make a change straight away at the beginning. Just, it might help you to know that I was like quite extreme when I started this. Picture on the left, you'll see this was my habit. Look at the shape of the torso. Same ones at the back. This is like horrible. So a huge bend in at the back here. Sternum bone is like angled way back at the top. The ribs sticking out the front, this round shape here. Incidentally, this is like a big reason why people have big bellies. It's not because the belly's big always. It's because they've carved in the lower back like this. So they've created this, they've pushed in the lower back, which pushes out the belly. It's totally logical. But everyone just goes straight to like sit-ups or whatever to try and reduce their belly. And this is a thing for women as well. So I showed you the picture earlier, the women doing the powder pigeon. Well, they're making their belly even more pronounced by doing that. So they're causing half of the problem they're trying to fix. This was me just standing by habit. You'll see it's not a fixed position. I'm actually doing movements here. I'm moving the upper sternum. The top of the sternum. I'm rotating it back and up where this green arrow is. The ribs at the front are going forward and down. They're rotating they're moving forward and down at the same time. And my sitting bones at the back are rotating back and up where the purple arrow is. So I'm doing these 3 movements, but to me, I'm just standing still. That's my experience of standing still. But really what I'm doing is I'm directing these 3 big movements at the same time. It's totally out of my awareness. I didn't know I was doing it. At this time, I was actually teaching people some of this stuff. I was teaching people to do with movement and posture, and I never looked at myself in a video and saw what I was doing. I thought I had a much longer straight back, and I was making myself taller. Looked on videos and I was horrified, and then that's when I began this work. So you'll see here this ruler is the rulers are the same size. So you'll see the ribs at the front are jutting out much further forward than the top of the sternum or the pelvis point. And a lot of my weight is further forward. So I'm actually collapsing forward in the middle and I have to pull the shoulders back at the top to stop myself falling back. So I did some new movements. I just did the ones in reverse. And I was playing around with putting myself in positions of, I wanted to shake up my habitual sense of equilibrium. And in order to do that, I lifted my toes, so my weight is on my heels. So this is to break up the habit patterns. And then while I did this, I did the opposite movements of what I was doing as I pulled the ribs in the middle back. I pulled the sternum at the top forward and up, and I pulled the sitting bones forward and down rather than back and up like this. So I did these opposite directions of movements, so these 3 movements at the same time, and look at the difference in the shape of the back here. Instead of this massive curve in, it's gone straight. And I have to tell you, this felt horrendous. So it's visibly straighter. I'm taller, it looks better, but it felt horrendous when I did it. And I would have never done those movements again if I hadn't saw the video. If I hadn't saw the video and analyzed the images to see what was really going on, I would have just thought that's a horrible feeling. That can't be it. That can't be it. The horrible feelings go away after a while. You just get used to them, because the problem is, like I said in the last lesson, if you do the wrong thing enough times, it just feels normal. It just felt normal for me to do these 3 big movements. It didn't feel normal for me to do those same movements in the reverse direction in the beginning. I've done it so many more times now, that feels more normal now. Well, it feels mostly normal. That's now out of my awareness. And then the next thing I'm working on, that's the thing that feels weird now. I wanted to show you this so you can, there's no point showing correct versions of things. You need to see things that are similar to what you'll be working on now as well. you'll need to make duplicate picture images of your screenshots, open them up in another file or whatever, and start drawing on arrows that you were doing. Do the opposite movements if you're similar to this, which a lot of people will be. Do the opposite movements while filming yourself side on. Then take screenshots again, standing, the full standing position, and see if they're different and compare them like this, like I've done here. It might take a bit of work to get this kind of difference, to straighten it like this. And even if you do get it, you might, and bear in mind, this is the very start when I was doing this thing, so anyone can do this. I was walking around like this for years. And then within seconds, I'd completely change the structure within 2 seconds. So you can do this. The problem is, as soon as you do it, you just revert back to the old way because the habits are so strong and it feels weird. That's why you need to practice. That's why this is for self-experimenters. You have to keep experimenting with it and changing things. It won't just fix. And we don't want it fixed. And you can't get someone else to do it for you because yours, like I said earlier with the scoliosis person, it just comes back. There was like an interesting video where there was like an old guy got anesthesia, however you say it, and they filmed him, and he was very rigid and uptight and all contorted, like like a lot of old people are, which they don't need to be, but they are. And then they gave him the anesthetic, and then you just saw him just straighten out, and all the tension disappeared. And then when he came back, when they took it out and he came back round, you just saw the whole contorted structure just quickly reestablish itself. So it wasn't there at all. It just all released and then just reappeared. So that's habits. It's obviously neurological as well as muscular. But it's mostly mental. And by that, I mean, over time, your conception of how to coordinate the parts together when you move create the same shape. So that's an extreme version. So for you, I sometimes call this living rigor mortis. So we're like kind of fixed in a certain position, like the dead person's body is when it goes fixed in a certain position. But this is my fixed rigor mortis on the left here. And then eventually I change it in 2 seconds by thinking through some new movements and having a plan of the movements, and after analyzing like we've been doing here. So you can change it. You'll just need to work on it. When you do the movements, so first of all, look to see, did you do those 3 movements in reverse or not? Or did you do something else? And also see, even if you did do them, did you do some other weird thing that you didn't expect? So for example, you may pull your head down and not notice. You may have done something weird like this, or contort your face, or do some really strange thing, or lift your arms up in the air without even noticing. And you'll see in the video and go, I don't remember doing that. This tells you something about the human condition, by the way. This week, become a posture pervert. So you want to, once you've done all this analysis of yourself like this, like you've done here, the next stage is to start analyzing other people in real time. So watch what they do and try and see the movements that are making up their posture. If you know people with what you think is bad posture, try and see the movements that they're doing. When they're sitting there, look at them from side on. If you can. If you see people who you think is good posture, analyze them from the side on the same way. You may find that the person you thought had good posture actually is just doing the Sergeant Major. And your brain is thinking a sort of simplistic way that we've been trained to think is just do the opposite. If you're slouching like this, just do the opposite. Do weights or exercises that do the opposite to straighten up like that. Again, that's like the Rubik's Cube. You have to do multiple movements at the same time. It doesn't work. So you can do this anywhere. You can do this at home. You can do this in the cafe. You can do this at the gym, wherever. Don't get caught. You do it on the beach. Beach is good because obviously people who are in less clothes, you can really see exactly what people are doing. Men on the beach try to look cool with their chest out. You'll see them doing the Sergeant Major. Women, you'll see, especially if they're like standing in front of people, they go out in front of people and they maybe take photos of their friend at the water, which they like to do. You'll often see a woman who's really leaning far back at the top and curving her lower back in because she's trying to maintain this power pigeon look while doing the camera, and she's doing even more of it, and it looks ridiculous, and she has no idea because no one's looking at her like that, like I'm looking. This is the posture pervert, not just pervert. And you will see that she's doing these movements. You see the guys are doing movements all the time. And then another fun thing to do is to do it with celebrities, because you can find videos and you can just play the same game. So as well as this being fun, it's also helps your brain understand your own posture better when you start analyzing other people. One of the best things you can do is start taking all the things I've taught you in these lessons on the future lessons and start teaching it to someone else, getting them to play with the movements and seeing what happens, because your brain will understand the principles, and then that makes them easy to apply to you. And then you can start changing your own posture when you see it more clearly. People will do the same. Their posture looks more or less the same all the time because they're doing the same movements all the time. So your goal is to try and see the movements and then apply it to you. So as I said, I showed you the picture earlier and said I'm still a bit cringe looking at those pictures. It's because I'm just comparing to things I'm doing now. But you get over the cringe. I mean, I don't cringe now like I did then. I mean, it's just a little bit because it's a public video. But in general, it just stops bothering you because you start looking at yourself from an objective point of view. You're looking at the images. You're detached from those things. You still experience them a little bit, but you're detached from them. And you can't change something if you're still trapped by the old experiences, the old feelings. You have to get away from it to do something new. This is why people get trapped in their posture. So once you've done all this and you've looked at other people and been a bit of a posture pervert, go back and analyze yourself again and see if it helps. Make some more videos in different situations. And again, the point is posture is not a fixed position, it's made of movements. So your goal is to see the movements to make up your posture. And then you can begin to change the movements. So you'll start to do that here. We're going to talk about a lot more about that in the next few, and show you, be more precise about the movements you need and why. And we're going to have a bigger plan of what you want the whole torso to look like. As I say, we're just going in step by step. Learn one thing at a time, and then we'll put them all together later. If you need help, get in touch, send me an email, message me on Twitter. If you want one-to-one, get in touch and we'll arrange time. And see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.